So what made you get into the film industry?
Um, it was very random. I was actually a competitive gymnast for a very long time, and I had like a weird entrance into the industry because I was a gymnast, and I had they were casting a horror film in my hometown,
Yeah.
and my friend who was also a gymnast and I thought it would be fun if we went to the mall, got some headshots, and then submitted those headshots to be an extra in the movie. So we did that. I get a call a couple weeks later saying it was a Wes Craven film. Wes Craven enjoyed your headshot and would like to see if you'd be interested in being a featured extra. So I became a featured extra. I had no acting experience whatsoever. And then essentially a year later, when I thought the movie was completely finished, I got a call saying they were doing reshoots and your character would be expanded. And they asked my mom if I could act and audition for it. And we were like, well, we'll find out. So I did the audition and I got it. And so that was the first role I ever filmed as an actor. And not long after that, I kind of dove into the acting world. So I quit gymnastics about 6 months later and fully committed myself to acting. It was around the time that I was applying to colleges. So I did a complete 180. I was looking at schools for sports, and then I did a complete 180 and applied to Tisch. And that's actually where I only went there briefly. It's part of NYU, but I went there for 6 months before kind of things shifted again, but I don't need to bore you with those details. So yeah, it was really the working with Wes Craven that got me into the industry in the first place. And then a lot has shifted since then with what I'm focusing on. But that's kind of how the whole story began.
Yeah. So that just like one decision with your friend just kind of changed your life, basically.
We literally went to the mall. Yeah. And they take those photos like when you're doing like Christmas cards for families.
Yeah.
That's who took our photo. And God, it's not a good photo of me, but that's the one that my mom still has it in her like desk drawer back in Connecticut. So it was that decision that one day that kind of got the ball rolling with acting. Yeah.
So you've also kind of expanded into like directing and writing. Do you have any preference over which you prefer?
I get this question all the time from friends especially, and right now, what's the date? September 10th, 2021. My focus is very much on creating films as a writer and a director. I still love acting. I've worked on some projects this year that are coming out, I don't know when, in the fall or next year. So I'm still working as an actor and auditioning as an actor. But a lot of my passion and my energy has shifted towards writing and directing. And so right now, if you were to ask me what I want to do in the future, I would say write and direct my own films. I think it would be fun down the line to like give myself small parts in the films, but I'm not a person who thinks I can handle being a lead in a film that I'm also directing and writing. I definitely don't think I have the capacity for that at this point in time. But yeah, a lot of the energy has been, I'm just using the word multi-hyphenate these days because I love acting still, and it's really what I got started in, but then the writing and directing has become a very big focal point for me, and I'm really passionate about it.
Yeah. Do you think a part of that's your kind of love for creating is more to get your creative side out? Do you think it's harder to do that as an actor?
I was thinking about, it's funny you asked me that because I was up getting coffee this morning, and for some reason, maybe I knew that question was coming, but like I was wondering to myself, why am I doing so much? Like, why? And I think it is because I'm just like, every fiber of my being is art. If I'm not writing, I'm drawing. If I'm not drawing, I'm painting. If I'm not painting, I'm trying to learn guitar. My days are so filled with art. And between writing, directing, and acting, I do feel like I'm able to be my most creative and authentic sort of self. So maybe there's certain things in acting that I clearly wasn't feeling just satisfied by if I was just acting. And I don't really know what those parts are. It could have been the like kind of power control part of me that wants kind of a little bit more of control in things. Because I think as an actor, there's a lot of situations where you find yourself not in control or listening to other people or taking direction and things like that. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that in doing writing, directing, and acting all together, I've been able to fill whatever voids I was feeling just when I was only auditioning.
Okay. So with just back to the acting side of it, do you have any techniques you use to get into character or to portray a character?
I absolutely don't, and I will honestly admit that. So I went, obviously you learn different techniques as you go along. You have, when I was at Tisch, I was doing Adler. A lot of people, subscribe to different techniques and methods. I think there's kind of like a pattern that I do. So, but I don't know if it's a method or a technique. So if I'm getting a role that I'm about to play, I'll definitely research. I'll definitely, I tend to, if there's an accent involved, I've been doing a lot of accents recently. I will definitely spend the 2 days before filming in that accent just to help with that. But I think a lot of the time, filming can be such a crazy experience because you show up and sometimes it's crazy and you sit down and they're like, action. And you're like, oh my gosh, what is going on? So I feel like my technique is just like being on my toes, especially, I put all the work in ahead of time so that I can be on my toes and be free when I get to the set. So it is a lot of research. For some roles, I've kept journals and kind of done journal entries. For the bigger roles, I've definitely done that. That I think, like within all my training over the past decade now, which is crazy. I've worked with a lot of phenomenal teachers, and they offer things that help and they offer things that don't help, and it totally depends. You kind of make your own tool belt and take what works for you. So I've just kind of created like the Shannon Walsh tool belt that works for me, and that's just kind of how I've dealt with things, and similar to auditions. I try to tell myself and try to work in a way that, like, whether the role is mine yet or I'm still auditioning, I approach it similarly. I approach it as if I did book it, so that I can really put my whole self into it.
Okay, yeah. So back on the directed again now. So I gave I watched On and On. So that's the film you made.
Really heartwarming, huh?
Yeah. I was I was kind of intrigued by that. So I was going to ask, what kind of inspired that?
That was definitely the most personal film I've ever done. So that was the guy who I worked with on that, who was my producer for that, is someone who I just have really great philosophical conversations with. And he had kind of instructed me to dig deep and there are some people who think it's too personal, and I've gotten that feedback, and I'm okay with that if that's kind of like where I'm starting. I think like I needed to get that story out to tell others. So I'm happy I got it out that was my second short film. So what inspired that was essentially like I am someone who has had a lot of anxiety and depression over my course of my life. And I was trying to just write stories and stories and stories, and none of them were working. And then, it was really my producer who was like, his name is Andrew. He was basically saying, what is really there? Like, what is there that's beneath the stories? And I was like, I don't know, probably this kind of crazy experience of a series of crazy experiences I had with like coming to terms with existentialism as a 7-year-old. So I really struggled with what it meant that where you go when you die and what happens when you die. And I did have these very, very violent panic attacks when I was very young. And I remember I refused to go to doctors for a while. And then I started going to doctors, and On and On was kind of born from my attempt to come to terms with all those experiences and all those panic attacks I had as a little kid.
Yeah.
And so that was my like adult self diving back into that. And that's actually funnily enough, I wouldn't call it a proof of concept, but that short is the opening of a feature that I'm trying to make right now. That idea of a young child or a teenager coming to terms with the existential concept of death and the abstract concept of death, and not just grief, right? Like, we're not just dealing with grief, we're dealing with like the abstract concept of what it means to die. That kind of is prevalent in all my writing. So it is interesting that On and this feature that I've written have a lot of crossover, and that's kind of a prevailing theme in both of these scripts. So that's kind of what I was trying to do with On and On.
Okay, so it sounds like your past experiences and your mental health kind of inspired that film. Do you think creating that film was helpful towards your mental health?
A great question. I think mental health is it's in every script I write, and it's probably in every script I will write. Like, if I have what is my thing as a writer, this is my thing. Dealing with mental health in adolescence heavily. So I think all my experiences as a writer-director will deal with that. The question of whether or not they've helped, I think it has. I mean, I coincidentally I was briefly seeing a cognitive behavioral therapist who, and this is kind of in the script, I know this, I don't know if a viewer would know this, but essentially like cognitive behavioral therapy tries to immerse you in the fear. So if someone is and I'm not a doctor, so I might be saying all this wrong, but if someone's a social, has a fear of social interactions, a CBT therapist could very much be like, they could very well say, go into a store and your homework is to walk up to a random person and do your fear, like experience your fear until you're not scared of it. So for me, and this is why the end of On and On is a song about death, is my therapist told me to write a song about death and start researching all the things that scared me. So that was black holes, that was different philosophers' opinions on the afterlife. So I kind of started researching that stuff, and then one of the assignments was to sing a song about it. So the song I sing at the end of On and On is the song that I wrote when I was working with this cognitive behavioral therapist. So no one knows that. I don't think people who even worked on the project know that. But yes, I do think it helped me come to terms with a lot of my fears in creating that, which is like why we create, right? I think one of my acting coaches told me, he used to say, the more personal you are, the more universal you are. And I very much believe that. So the more personal I can get, and I do think it resonates with other people, or I hope, obviously, that it does.
Yeah. I think that's kind of interesting that you took elements from your real life and put it into the film. Because I've seen a CBT therapist about my mental health and tried hypnotherapy, and both people actually said a good piece of advice is using creative outlets like music, just like you. So that's really interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. So you know what? Now I'm realizing like maybe this short film was kind of a cognitive behavioral therapy assignment.
Yeah. You could argue that. Yeah.
You could argue that in its own way. It was a method to help me come to terms with my own fears. And it's a piece of art I just submitted to some festivals too.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Interesting.
So, obviously, like you've just been talking about, you're really liking the directing at the minute. Are there any films, maybe like recently, you've watched and thought, I would have directed that differently?
Interesting you asked this, because 2 nights ago I watched Promising Young Woman, and I actually thought I would do, I loved it, and I was like, I could see myself directing this. I think the shots I would have chosen were actually kind of similar to what I saw. So that was actually the first movie I'd seen in a while where I resonated and like identified and actually thought I would make similar choices, which I don't usually, right? Usually you're kind of there being like, I would have done this. I would have done this.
Yeah.
So that's a movie that I watched recently that I identified with, and I love the tone of that film. I hope and dream and wish that a short film that I'm literally trying to wrap today, called The Rose Ceremony, it's very the colors are super similar to I'm pointing to my TV, that's why I keep doing this. To Promising Young Woman. It's a dark comedy, female-centered piece. So there is a lot, and our sets use pops of red, which is crazy. I mean, that was literally the film I was like, I want this color palette is perfect. But I didn't say that till post-production. I actually hadn't seen the film when I wrote or filmed mine. Like I literally just watched it 2 days ago. In terms of film, I would do differently. I don't know if there's some films that I've seen recently that I know I couldn't. I just have things that like I think I wouldn't be good at, and I think there's certain things about like finding your niche. I watched Sound of Metal recently, which I thought was phenomenal. And I was just like, wow, this would have been, if I had been handed the script, like, I don't know what I would have done with it. I think what they did with it was phenomenal. But I totally would have I definitely would have done a different angle from what they did, but I haven't sat and thought enough to know what I would have done, but that's like a monster of a script in a beautiful way to have received. And I think they frickin' killed it. Yeah.
So that is a thing with you, like where you'll watch things and think, I would have done similar to that or differently.
My boyfriend always says, like, you don't watch enough. Like, he consumes everything. Like, he's watched every television show and he watches a lot of film. The reason why people are like, how have you not seen that? Like, this is what you do, you know. I find it, as much as I love watching film, it's a little exhausting because my brain goes into overdrive when I watch it. So I'm like sitting there analyzing the shots and the color and the acting and the directing and the writing and the structure. So it's almost like, I don't want to say it's work because I love it so much, but it is using mental energy. So yeah, it's using mental energy. So I think sometimes, like, I watch reality TV because I can turn off and just laugh and not study it. So like, I know, who was this? Someone was I was reading an interview where Jennifer Lawrence was, I think this was an interview where Jennifer Lawrence would, between takes while she was filming Mother, she would go and watch like the Kardashians or something in her, like in her trailer or something. I totally get that, because there's certain things you want to watch that you can just watch. And I think a lot of people can do that. For me, it's very hard to not overanalyze and study and take away from, which is such an important thing to do, but it does require energy. And I spent all day writing, so like sometimes I just need a break, and I'm really bad at relaxing.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
But I do find myself. Yeah, exactly.
So a bit of a different question. So obviously you're in like the film entertainment industry. What is that like as a woman? I'm guessing that's different in a lot of ways.
Yeah, super different. I mean, I moved to LA 2 years ago. I got here and then the pandemic happened. So I got here, then it was the holidays, and then a couple more months passed, and then, you know, we were in quarantine. So I feel like I'm only this quarantine for me was spent writing. I wrote 7 scripts, so I just was insane. Not all features, but a lot of features, a lot of pilots. So that's all I did. I sat right there and I just wrote. Probably should have, worked out more and done things like that. But anyways, I think it's hard being a woman in this industry. I think there's a lot of experiences I've had as an actor that I don't like thinking about or looking back at, that directly had to do with my being female. And there are experiences that were great. Obviously, I've had so many experiences I'm so grateful for, but you know, as directors, you can't ignore the lack of female representation you see on the Oscar ballot, you know? And it is changing, and I hope that the change continues, but me identifying as female is definitely something I'm proud of. And I want to, I'm so proud to be like, I'm a young female director and I want to do X, Y, and Z. And I think certain aspects of the industry are changing and helping that sort of progression happen. And there's also just like such phenomenal female directors out there that like, females should be given the exact same opportunity. You know what I mean? So being a woman in Hollywood is, you know, you read a lot and you see a lot, and it's a very convoluted experience. And then there's the whole thing with how media portrays it, and you know, but as personally, I think I've been very lucky with the experiences I've had being a woman in Hollywood. But I also feel like I have so much more I want to do, and I'm gonna do it either way. Like I'm not gonna let these things, I'm not gonna let there be like a ceiling to what I can do, or I will push through that as women have before me and continue to do. I think it's a very different experience being a female in this industry, especially when you get on calls. Like I was on a call the other day, and I was like me and 5 guys, 5 men. Right. So I was just like, it's just interesting. This is something it's new to me, doing this side of things, but
it does, like, I guess, like, from my perspective, I just see in the media all like the sexism going on
so much.
Yeah, it's
also like, why do we have to just be like sitting there judging our Oscar dresses? You know, let's have a conversation about the work that's going up in the Oscars or the festivals. Let's, you know, I don't want to be judged for what I'm wearing on the red carpet. I want to be judged for the creative output I'm giving the world. Yeah,
see, that's a good point. That I just like you said, I guess it kind of just gets overlooked in the media.
Yeah,
pretty sad.
Which is why, like, Chloe with Nomadland was such a beautiful win, because that movie's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So.
So, sorry, that got a bit deep there.
That's okay.
So, which actor or actress would you love to work with?
Who? I've said this time and time again, and I think I look like her, so I think that contributes to it. But Jodie Foster is I'm a huge fan of Jodie Foster. She's actually had like a similar, you know, she's delved into things that I want to delve into as well. So that's cool. I literally couldn't. There's just so many right now. There's I feel like every movie I've seen. I love Carey Mulligan. There's a lot of up and coming actors too who I think are just phenomenal. You know what I watched the other day that I absolutely loved was Coda, which I think it just came out on, was it? I'm not sure what, I'm not going to say because I don't remember what streaming platform I watched it on, but it was so good. And that girl is so good. Jeff Bridges is another one.
Yeah.
I could name so many people, but I've always said Jodie Foster and Jeff Bridges. Those have always been like my go-to, I would die to work with you answers.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's a bit of an open-ended question because there are quite a lot of amazing actors.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the other side of that, obviously you don't have to name names, but are there any actors you wouldn't want to work with again? Like that were maybe difficult or just...
No, you know what's funny? People are always like, oh, how was working with this person? How was working with this person? I've been super lucky. I have literally not had a bad experience with another actor, which is,
That's good.
I think, pretty rare. Yeah, I literally haven't. I think from every set I've worked on, I have an ongoing relationship with at least one actor that I still talk to this day. Like I did a movie in, 2014 with a friend of mine who I'm seeing for lunch tomorrow. I was just chatting with a guy who I met at the premiere of my first, that Wes Craven film in 2010. So and then yesterday, wow, now I'm like going through this. I'm like, yeah, you do keep in contact with people. There was the kid who played my brother in Begin Again. I was spending time with, talking to yesterday. So I've had very positive experiences with all the actors I've worked with. So I don't think I have an answer for that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good thing, I guess, you know.
Yeah, it's a good thing. I think I've been lucky. Yeah, exactly.
Your new film, The Rose Ceremony, that's out soon. Could you give us like a little rundown of what that's about?
Oh, yes. So The Rose Ceremony is a twisted, dark comedy about how far an exhausted intern will go for her glass of wine. Right. So during the pandemic, true story, I spent an hour trying to open a bottle of wine with a corkscrew, and then it was a twist off. So I spent literally an hour trying to open a bottle of wine. You'll see in the movie, like I was hitting, you know, the shoe thing, hitting it against the wall. I was putting, I was using a corkscrew to put it in the bottle. And then an hour later, I was like, oh my goodness, it's a twist off. So then I was just thinking I'm an idiot for about 2 hours. And I was like, I think I need to make a movie about this. So it's basically, it has a very interesting, you know how, I don't know if you've seen the White Lotus, which is like, everyone is loving right now. Oh my gosh, it's so good. White Lotus has a very, very, in my opinion, like very specific tone, and it's a little off kilter. And I hadn't seen White Lotus, but now I'm using that to describe the tone of it, just because it's a little off kilter. It's dark, there's blood, there's gruesome sounds, but it's just a really funny situation. The Rose Ceremony is interesting because it's definitely the first movie that I've ever made that's comedic. I've never made something funny. I'm very much like a drama person. Between acting, writing, and directing, all my stuff is very dramatic. And this is a dark comedy. And we're trying to finish it. We have the music coming in today. Yeah. And I will tell you now, this whole film is going to hinge on how the music is, how the music sounds. It'll be very important. So I'm super excited for that. And then we start submitting like next week. My best friend in the entire world, one of my best friends in the entire world, is a phenomenal actor and phenomenal creator. So his production company is behind it, Moon Jelly Productions. His name's Cameras Johnson, and he has been really instrumental in helping me get this off the ground. And I have no idea how it will do in the circuit, but I'm very excited and hopeful.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a kind of new challenge for you if it's a comedy and you've never done that before, so it should be exciting to release.
Yeah, and I'm super excited for that. It's just interesting because it's very simple, right? So like a lot of my stuff that I write, I feel like is very convoluted, and there's messages and there's underlying motifs and things like this and that. But with this one, it's literally she just wants to open her wine. Like that's the whole premise. Right. So we'll see. Either that will resonate with people and they'll be like, oh my God, that was me during quarantine, or it won't. So we're gonna find out.